Okay, good morning. Good morning. So nice to see all of you. We live in an age of autonomy. We enjoy personal freedoms, rights, and liberties, even our own personal space. We don't like people to tell us what to do, how to act, what to think. Some of us have issues with figures of authority. And our Torah, at first glance, appears to be authoritarian. It's a book of rules. Thou shalt do this. Thou shalt not, don't do that. It appears restrictive. And yet, as you all know, the Mishnah in Avot states that there is no one as free as he who is engaged in the study of Torah. No one as free? How is the Torah about freedom? It would appear to be about submission to authority, to Hashem's authority. The Torah is, as I mentioned, lichora, seemingly authoritarian. And this is something I think that modern man struggles with. And to be completely honest with you, this is something that I've struggled with in my own life. I don't like people telling me what to do, how to think, why I moved to Israel. That's a separate question. But I enjoy my freedoms and liberties. And, I even admittedly have issues with authority figures. I was a big troublemaker as a child back in school. Shh, don't tell anyone. I'd like to keep my job at the OU Center. So I've struggled with this question, and this morning I'd like to explore together with you a number of passages in the Talmudic and Midrashic literature which describes the scene at Har Sinai when the Jewish people received the Torah. We are just a day before Chag HaShavuot, when we commemorate the giving of the Torah at Har Sinai. So I thought this morning we'd explore together a number of passages in the Gemara, in the Midrash, which describe the experience at Har Sinai. And we'll see a number of descriptions which apparently, lichora, appear to be in conflict with one another. But we'll see how in actuality they describe our deep relationship with Hashem and his holy Torah. So the Torah, of course, in Shmot Yutet, and I'll put the source sheets up on the screen in a moment, describes the dramatic scene at Har Sinai. The thunder, the lightning, the thick cloud upon the mountain, the loud sound of the shofar that kept going and going, the smoke, the fire. Okay, here I'll put the source sheets up on the screen. Let's do this share screen. Okay, here. So in source number 1, just a couple of psukim from Shmot Perek Yutet. Vayihi vayom hashlishi, it was on the 3rd day, biot haboker, v'yi kolot uvrakim vanan kaver al har, the kol shofar chazak me'od. Okay, again, the description of Mount Sinai with the kolot uvrakim, the thunder and lightning, the voices, the sounds, the cloud, the smoke that was heavy on the mountain, the kol shofar chazak me'od, the very strong blast of the shofar, vayecherad kol ha'am asher b'machaneh, and the nation, the Jewish people, were frightened. They were scared. Again, this is a frightening scene that the Torah is describing here. And then the next pasuk Yud Zayin, v'yotze Moshe ta'am likrat Elokim min ha'machaneh. And so Moshe, and we'll come back to this a little later on this morning because this is important. Moshe, he takes the nation, he goes out, and the Torah describes he is escorting the nation. V'yotze Moshe ta'am likrat Elokim. He's escorting them, he's bringing them, so to speak, to God. He's bringing them to Har Sinai. And in the Talmudic and Midrashic literature, Moshe is like this matchmaker, or really one of the shoshvinim, this bridesman, or groomsman. That's the word I was looking for. A groomsman that he's bringing the Jewish people to HaKadosh Baruch Hu at Har Sinai. So he's escorting us from the camp. And then the pasuk concludes, "Vayityatzu b'tachtit hahar," that they stood at the foot of the mountain, but literally it can be understood to mean underneath the mountain. Okay, they stood underneath the mountain. So there's this very famous passage that I'd like to look together with you at that appears here in source number 2 in Masechet Shabbat and Daf Peichet, but it also appears elsewhere. It appears in Masechet Avodah Zarah, and it's quoted in Midrashim. Rashi even cites this in his Perush al HaTorah. So take a look at source number 2. Vayityatzu betachtit hahar. What does it mean that they stood at the foot of the mountain, or literally, betachtit hahar can be understood to mean underneath the mountain? A very famous midrash, a very famous agadah. Amar Rav Avdimi bar Chama bar Chasa. Rav Avdimi, the son of Chama, the son of Chasa, said, Milamed, this comes to teach, this verse implies, Shekafa HaKadosh Baruch Hu Aleihem et hahar kigigit, that God, so to speak, the Holy One, blessed be He took the mountain and He held it over the heads of the Jewish people. Again, you're probably familiar with this medrash, this passage in the Gemara. It's a very famous passage. He held the mountain over their heads like a barrel, like a gigit, a wine barrel, word that's used many places in the Gemara and the Midrash. The Amar Lahem, and he said to them, Im atem mekablim haTorah mutav. If you are ready to accept the Torah, good. V'im lav, but if not, sham tehei kvuratchem. Here, or literally there at Sinai, will be your graves. Okay? In other words, if you accept my Torah, good, Hashem says, but if not, I'm going to drop this cask on you. I'm going to drop this barrel on you. And you're going to die. And this is a very difficult passage. We're forced to try and make sense of it and try and understand it somehow. I mean, is this how we receive the Torah? We'll come back to that question in a moment. But the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov. So Rav Acha bar Yaakov said, Mikan, from here, Moda'ara ba'loraita. This is a great protest to the Torah. Meaning, if we received the Torah in such a way, this puts into question our whole relationship, our whole covenant with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Amar Rava says, Rava answers really, Afal pichein, nevertheless, hadur kiblua bimei Achashverosh. The Jewish people, I don't want to spend too much time on this morning, but the Jewish people subsequently received the Torah again, if you will, in the days of Achashverosh. In Megillat Esther, it describes how the Jewish people accepted upon themselves the holiday of Purim, Kimu v'kiblu haYehudim, and the Gemara says in a number of places, the Medrash says, Kimu masha kiblu kvar, that they upheld what they had already received. In other words, they made a renewed acceptance to the Torah. So if indeed, according to Rav Acha bar Yaakov, this description of Har Sinai calls into question our covenant, calls into question our relationship with the Torah, that we didn't accept it with our consent, with our own free will. So if so, comes along Rav and says, no, but don't worry. Subsequently, in later generations, and this is much later in Jewish history, but later in Jewish history, the Jewish people acquiesced and they made a renewed acceptance of the Torah. They renewed their commitment, and that, of course, is one of consent. Kimu v'kiblu haYehudim, kimu masha kiblu kfar, one of love and consent. I don't want to focus too much on that last piece in the Gemara, but I'd like to ask a few questions. Mainly, what's with this description, this very dark, violent description of coercion, that somehow HaKadosh Baruch Hu held Mount Sinai over our heads? Is that how we receive the Torah? Anyone bothered by this description? Is that how we became a nation? Is that how we entered into a covenant with Hashem? And as we just saw, the Gemara continues, and Rav Acha bar Yaakov calls into question our whole relationship with the Torah. I mean, is this really how we receive the Torah at Sinai? How does this imagery make you feel? Of course, we've all seen images of religious coercion in the world. And even here, Lo Aleinu, in the modern state of Israel, we've seen groups trying to impose their beliefs on others with force. And it shakes us to our very core, because we know deep down inside, that's not Judaism. We know that that's not religion, religious coercion. But what's problematic about this passage is it would seem to contradict what the Torah itself describes about the revelation at Sinai. This Agadah, or this Medrash here, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu held Har Sinai over our heads and forced us into this coercion seems to contradict what the Torah itself says and how the Torah describes the Jewish people willingly accepted the Torah. We have there in Shmot Yud Tet, Vayanu Ko, excuse me. The Torah describes Vayanu Kol Ha'am Yachdav. The entire nation answered together at once. Vayomru, and said, Kol Asher Diber Hashem Na'aseh. All these things, everything, every word that Hashem has spoken, we will do, we will observe. And then, of course, the most famous words in the Torah, perhaps the two most famous words, Na'aseh v'nishma, in Shmot Perek Chaf Daled, a little later. It's recorded, Vayomru Kol Asher Diber, similar formulation, all that Hashem has spoken, all that Hashem has said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will listen. Right? As I said, perhaps the two most famous words in the Torah. Na'aseh v'nishma, the Torah was given to us and we chose it. Not only did we choose the Torah, but we willingly accepted it and we're willing to place the Na'aseh before the Nishma. We committed to observing the Torah before we knew all the details, before we knew exactly what we were getting into. The Torah itself describes how we accepted it lovingly with complete trust. I always give the example. Imagine if a parent asks you to sign something. Right? Honey, I need your signature on this. Right? I mean, do you need to go over it with a fine-toothed comb? Do you need to say, Abba, give me a day or two. I'd like to have my lawyer look it over. Of course not, assuming that there's a healthy relationship, because implicit in the relationship is trust. That's Na'aseh v'nishma. It's trust. So this description in the Gemara there, on Daf Peichet in the Shabbat, which describes how Hashem forced us into this covenant, would seem to contradict what the Torah itself describes. The Na'aseh v'nishma. How we accepted the Torah out of complete trust. We weren't coerced into it. And in fact, again, to make things even more difficult, on the very same page, the very same amud, the very same side of the page, the very same folio, the Gemara there in Shabbat Daf Peichet, again, gives us a very, very different picture of what happened at Har Sinai. If you take a look at source number 3, okay, here on the sheets, hope you all can see on the screen. Darash Rabbi Simai, Rabbi Simai expounded, B'sha'ah she'ikdimu Yisrael na'aseh l'nishma. Now here the Gemara is invoking na'aseh v'nishma. At the time when the Jewish people said na'aseh v'nishma, and they prefaced B'sha'ah she'ikdimu Yisrael, at the time when they prefaced the nishma with the na'aseh, when they said the na'aseh first we will do, and then, only then, we will listen. Ba'u shishim ribo shel malachei hasharet. 600,000 ministering angels came, l'kol echad ve'echad Yisrael, to each and every Jew, kishru lo shnei ktarim, and they gave them each 2 crowns. They crowned each and every one of them with 2 crowns, echad keneged na'aseh, one corresponding to we will do, ve'echad keneged nishma, and one corresponding to we will listen. Right? You may have seen your kids or your grandkids come home from Gan, oftentimes on Erev Shavuot, when there is school, when we're not all in quarantine, and when there is Gan. Most of my kids have, Baruch Hashem, returned to school already. I have to thank Hashem for that. So the Gemara describes how the angels placed 2 crowns. And, our kids come home. You may hear some of my kids in the background because my 3-year-old still hasn't gone back to Gan and hasn't opened up to full capacity. So her and some of her friends have not been let back in. So I'm teaching and also babysitting this morning. But they come home from Gan with these paper crowns that are actually double crowns. And it's beautiful. It's this passage right here, this medrash right here, Shabbat Daf Peichet, that these 2 crowns, one for Na'aseh, one for Nishma. The kids, it's very cute, come home with these double paper crowns. And then the Gemara continues, V'kevan shechatu Yisrael, but when the Jewish people sinned with the golden calf, yardu mea ve'esrim ribo malachei chavala. So then, all of a sudden now, double the amount of angels, 1.2 million angels, and this time it's malachei chavala. These are angels of punishment, of injury, literally. Ufir kum, and they removed those crowns that the Jewish people had previously received. And then the Gemara continues and says, Amar Rabbi Elazar said, B'shah she'ikdimu Yisrael na'aseh l'nishma, when the Jewish people prefaced that nishma with the na'aseh, we will first do and then we will listen, yatzta bat kol, a heavenly voice, a voice from Shemayim issued forth, the Amra lahen, and said to them, Mi gila lebanai razeh, who revealed to my children this secret, this passcode, if you will, shemalachei hasharet mishtamshim bo, which only the ministering angels use. Who told them about this secret, the secret passcode? In other words, the Na'aseh v'Nishma expresses this intimate relationship. It's something that previously only the angels knew about. It's something that belongs up in the heavens, and somehow the Jewish people, with divine insight, with prescience, whatever, they knew to say the Na'aseh before the Nishma. So on the very same Amud, the very same side of the very same page there in Shabbat Daf Pechet, a completely different picture of what took place at Har Sinai. Here, a description of consent, of the Jewish people entering into the covenant willfully. And not just consent and will, but trust, as I said, trust, okay? And in fact, we have many, many other statements in the Talmudic and Midrashic literature which seem to contradict this image of coercion, this image of kafa, Kadosh Baruch Hu aleim et hahar kigigit, that Hashem held the mountain over their heads like a cask, like a barrel, and forced them to accept the Torah. The Mechilta here, I put a number of different midrashim. We'll take a look together in a moment, but the Mechilta elsewhere actually describes how the Jewish people accepted the Torah willfully with joy, describes Hashem not as a tyrant in the heavens ready to strike, but rather as a zaken malei rachamim, an older man filled with mercy. For me, this evokes the image of my grandfather, who, Alav HaShalom, just passed away this year, shortly before Purim, just a few days before Purim. The idea of Hashem as a Zaken Malei Rachamim, giving the Torah to the Jewish people, is like a grandfather giving a gift to his grandchild. And other midrashim we'll take a look at together in a moment describe Har Sinai like the wedding between Hashem and the Jewish people. Hashem as groom, Klal Yisrael as bride. This is an image that we're all familiar with. So take a look here at source number 4, the Mechilta, the Parashat Yitro. So again, I mentioned before, the Torah describes that Moshe is like the shadchan, or like one of the groomsmen. He's bringing the Jewish people, the Torah describes, to God. Amar Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi said, Yudaya Doresh, it was actually Yehuda that darshaned this pasuk, that expounded on this verse. Vayomer Hashem mi Sinai ba. The Torah says later on in Devarim Lamed Gimel that Hashem mi Sinai ba, he came from Sinai. Hashem came from Sinai. So the Midrash says, Al tikra ken, ela Hashem li Sinai ba. No, it really should read that Hashem came to Sinai. It doesn't mean that Hashem came from Sinai, right? Moshe is bringing the Jewish people to Mount Sinai, and then it should read that Hashem comes to Mount Sinai and meets them there. But instead, the Torah says Hashem mi Sinai ba. Hashem came from Sinai. So what does that mean? Right? It should say Hashem li Sinai ba litain Torah Yisrael. Oh, it should say that he came to Sinai to give the Torah to the Jewish people. Oh, and Omer came. Or maybe no. Maybe there is something intentional when the Torah says Hashem mi Sinai ba, that he came from Sinai. Ella, rather, what does it mean when it says Hashem mi Sinai ba? where I've underlined lekabel et Yisrael kichatan zeh shehu yotze likrat kala. You know what it means? Yeah. When the Torah says that Hashem came from Sinai, it's intentional. It means that he came from Sinai to greet Israel, to greet the Jewish people, like a chatan, like a groom walks to greet his kala. Now it's interesting. This is the source of a custom that is observed at many Jewish weddings, where when the kala, the bride, is walking down to the chuppah, the chatan, or the chosin, takes a few steps from the chuppah to greet his kala, to greet his bride. It's a beautiful minhag. Where does it come from? It comes from this description in the Midrash of how Hashem came from Sinai to greet his bride, Israel. And in fact, many of the customs we observe at the contemporary Jewish wedding come from these midrashim which describe the scene at Har Sinai. The lapidei eish, for example, the torches of fire. Okay, we don't carry torches. It's not so safe in wedding halls. We instead carry candles. Because many midrashim describe the scene at Mount Sinai, not one of coercion, not one of Hashem as a tyrant ready to drop the mountain on our heads, but rather as a wedding that took place. And take a look here at source number 5. This is Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, early midrash. Same thing, okay? And this midrash bases itself on the pasuk we saw, really the pasukim we've already seen. Moshe is leading the Jewish people. He's like, again, the groomsman, the shadchan, if you will. And even God, the midrash says, again, is walking towards the Jewish people to greet them like a chatan goes out to greet his kala, his bride. So too, God left Sinai to greet them and give them the Torah. It's this wedding. Okay, here, look at source number 6, another midrash that describes the wedding that took place at Mount Sinai. By the way, I've seen floating around the internet already this year, and I've seen it in previous years. It's a beautiful thing. People will post a wedding invitation. They'll post an image of a wedding invitation, but instead telling you about, Yassel, who's getting married to, Rivka. It will have HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Knesset Yisrael, and the date will be Shavuot. And I don't want to say Vav Sivan, because as you know, the date with regards to Shavuot is not explicit in the Torah. There's a lot to discuss about that, but they'll say that the date is Chag HaShavuot, and the location, it's not some wedding hall in Talpiot or in Givat Shaul, but or Ramat Rachel, but the wedding hall is Har Sinai, right? As I said, many of our customs, our rich and beautiful customs that we observe at the contemporary Jewish wedding have their roots here in these descriptions of Har Sinai as the chuppah. So the Medrash Tanchuma here, okay, in source number 6, the Torah describes how Hashem completed speaking to Moshe and then gave him the luchot. The pasuk says, "Vayitein el Moshe." Hashem gave to Moshe kichaloto ledaberito. Kichaloto, when he finished speaking with him, Behar Sinai, on Mount Sinai, he gave him the Shnei Luchot Ha'idut, the 2 tablets of testimony, Luchot Even, Ktuvim be'etzbei Elokim, tablets of stone written with the finger of God. Okay, so what does the midrash here, the Tanchuma, do with this? Kichaloto ledaberito. Okay, look here at the bottom where I've underlined. Davar acher, don't read when he finished speaking with him. Kichaloto, read it kikalato, like his bride. Again, just another midrash which suggests that Har Sinai is this chuppah. So in these midrashim here, Har Sinai is not this scary experience. It's not this threatening image of the mountain being held over our heads as a threat, coercing us into the covenant. But here, perhaps the image of Har Sinai over our heads, reading these midrashim, Har Sinai is transformed into a chuppah. The mountain over our heads is not a cask or a barrel ready to be dropped on us, but the mountain over our heads is a wedding canopy. It's a chuppah. Okay? And I'd like to go back to a midrash that we saw. I'd like to take a look together with you at the second part of it. This is the Mechilta. I'll put it back on the screen for you. Okay. The Mechilta here in source number 4 continues. And remember, the Torah describes how the Jewish people were frightened. Lightning and thunder, the sound of the shofar, the kolot, ubrakim, the smoke, the ash, the fire. It was a frightening scene. So the Midrash says, Vayityatzu. What does it mean that they stood underneath the mountain? The Midrash says, Nitzafafu. They huddled together. Okay? They huddled together. When the Torah describes that they stood under the mountain, or at the foot of the mountain, it means that they huddled together under the mountain. They perhaps were looking for protection under the mountain because there's this frightening scene. Right? They heard Hashem's voice. They couldn't take it anymore. They had to tell Moshe, make it stop. We can't take it. It's too frightening. So the Midrash says, what does it mean by Yatzvu? They stood underneath the mountain. It means that they huddled together. Melamed shahayu Yisrael mityarim mipnei hazikim mipnei hazavaot mipnei hara'amim mipnei habrakim habayim. As I said, the Midrash says that this expresses or teaches that the Jewish people were in fear. They were afraid of the lightning and the thunder and the sounds and, again, this frightening experience. Betachtit hahar doesn't mean that they were underneath the mountain. Melamed shmitlash hahar mimekomo. Again, Midrash is understanding this literally, that they are literally underneath the mountain. It teaches that the mountain was uprooted from its place. V'kiru ve'amdu tachat hahar. But here the Jewish people, they gathered together and they stood together underneath the mountain. But instead of it being a threatening image of Hashem ready to drop the mountain on them if they don't accept the Torah, here they're taking refuge. They're finding protection underneath the mountain. A very different image. It's in stark contrast to that passage in the Gemara that we began with. And then the Midrash ends by bringing a verse from Shir HaShirim, from the Song of Songs, which of course is the love song or the love story between God and the Jewish people, which describes that intimate relationship, describes that deep love. It describes it in, if you read it literally, very graphic imagery, to the extent that Chazal were concerned about accepting this book into our Tanakh, into our canon, until Rabbi Akiva came along and said that if all of the books of the Tanakh are holy, Shir HaShirim is the holy of holies, because of course it can't be understood simply as just a love story between two human beings. It's the great love between God and the Jewish people, between God and his bride Israel. Okay, it's that intimacy, that special bond. So the Midrash quotes a verse that I think is so beautiful. Yonati bechagvei hasela compares the Jewish people to my dove in the clefts of the rock. In other words, the Jewish people, according to this Midrash, are seeking refuge underneath the mountain. And Hashem is protecting them from this frightening sight, from the kolot ubrakim, from the kol shofar. He's protecting them with the mountain. So this is a very, very different description of Har Sinai. This is in stark contrast to what we began with. Okay, here the people are scared, they're trembling, so Hashem holds them in the mountain to protect them. And Midrash continues and says, just like a dove finds shelter in the clefts of the rock, so too my dove Israel finds protection underneath the mountain. In this Midrash, almost in a motherly way, Hashem is putting his arm around us with the mountain. He's, so to speak, protecting us, nurturing us. So the question, of course, is which one is it? What was the experience at Har Sinai like? We have these conflicting images in these various midrashim and agadot. What was the experience at Sinai like? Was it one of coercion and force? Or was it one of choice, consent? Na'aseh v'nishma. We chose the Torah. We will do, and then we will listen. Is the mountain over our head a threatening image, one of impending doom and destruction? Or is the mountain a chuppah, a wedding canopy, a symbol of divine love? Is Hashem a tyrant, a vengeful God? Or, as I said, as some of the midrashim describe, a zaken malei rachamim, an elderly person filled with mercy, giving us the Torah like a grandfather with a smile. Right? Is the mountain over our heads a cask, a barrel ready to drop on us? Or is the Torah above us, or the mountain above us, is the mountain above us protecting us like a dove finds protection, seeks refuge in the clefts of the rock? So, lichora, these midrashim are sotrim zeh zeh. They appear to contradict one another. So which one is it? Which one is it? The answer is, it's really both. And these various midrashim convey and express two different elements in our relationship with Hashem and his holy Torah. They express a dialectic, a tension that's inherent in every relationship. In every relationship, there's choice, consent, communication, intimacy, love. But there's also commitment. There are obligations, responsibilities, expectations. You have to give in a relationship. The very word for love, ahava, of course, comes from hav, which means to give. Sometimes you're tired, but your wife asks you to take the garbage out. And where we live in Har Nof, I got to climb up first 80 steps and walk a block and a half, although Baruch Hashem, I make my teenage boys do it when they're willing to. But every relationship requires giving, hard work, commitment. And sometimes that means doing something that you don't want to do, or at least something that you think you don't want to do. And that's not easy, especially today when many people are concerned first and foremost with themselves and their own needs, my needs, me. You know, many have pointed out that a lot of our gadgets today, begin with I. There's the iPhone, iPad, iPod. It's me. It's the I. Okay, some even pointed out that some of the snacks that we eat today here in Israel are, bisli, my bite, bisli, my bis, my bite, my snack. But today, many people are focused on themselves, and I think that's why so many relationships today fail. People just want that first aspect of the relationship, the love, the intimacy, but they're not willing to commit to the other side of the coin, the obligations. And it's true, I think, with our relationship with Hashem and his Torah. And when I realized this, it was very profound for me. In our relationship with Hashem and his Torah, there's love, there's intimacy, meaning, depth, wisdom, simcha, joy, even pleasure. And that, of course, is the image of Har Sinai, like the chuppah, like the wedding canopy. But what comes with every relationship, there are also obligations. It's a commitment. It's a covenant. Sometimes I may have to do something that isn't easy, that requires sacrifice. And that, of course, is this image of the mountain being held over our heads. Kafa alehem et har kigigit. One of the themes in the thought of the Rav Yosef Dov Halevi Soloveitchik Zatzal is that halacha, Jewish law, requires of man at times to surrender. surrender. This was a theme in the thought of Rav Soloveitchik. Sometimes I might want to do something, but the halacha dictates that I can't. I must submit myself to Hashem's will. We speak, of course, of Ol Malchut Shamayim, the yoke of heaven. It's a yoke. It's a burden upon us. Now, you could see that burden as overbearing, or you could see it as something that gives you structure, gives you direction. Imagine if the animal doesn't have a yoke on him, he'll wander aimlessly. The yoke gives the animal direction. But sometimes serving Hashem requires me, as the Mishnah in Avot says, to nullify my own ratzon, my will, my desires, before Hashem's ratzon, before His will, with the ultimate goal, of course, of aligning my will with His will. The ultimate goal of making my will into His will, making them one and the same. How do we refer to serving Hashem in Judaism? It's avodat Hashem. It's an avodah. It's servitude. And these concepts of submission and a yoke and servitude are difficult for modern man because, as I began with, we live in an age of autonomy. But when you are truly in love with someone, when you're madly in love with someone, it means you're willing to surrender. It doesn't mean chas v'shalom, God forbid, that you're a doormat to be trampled upon. It means that all you want to do is give of yourself to them. Now, if you don't convey this nuanced understanding, this complex relationship, this duality, both the intimacy and the commitment, then you don't have Jewish continuity. If you have one without the other, it can be very dangerous. If you teach only the burden, only the submission to your child, to your grandchild, you won't succeed. But if you teach only the love and the joy without the sense of commitment and responsibility, also, I believe you won't have Jewish continuity. And I think that's what the Gemara that we began with means when it says that if you don't accept the Torah, sham tehei kvuratchem, there will be your graves. Right? Remember, the Gemara said that Hashem Kivyachol held the mountain over their heads like a cask, like a barrel, and says, if you accept the Torah, mutav, good. But if not, sham tehei kvuratchem. What does that mean? Here will be your graves, or there will be your graves. It's this imagery with the graveyard. Why couldn't the Medrash just say, I'll drop it on you, you'll die? What does it mean? Here will be your graves. What is a graveyard, after all? A graveyard is a monument to something that once was, but no longer is. There's no life there. Now, of course, in Judaism, we believe that the neshama lives forever, and people go to visit graveyards, okay? But some of you might know that, according to the Vilna Gaon, perhaps for Kabbalistic reasons, he didn't go to the graveyards. It's mentioned in a footnote in Rav Soloveitchik's Halachic Man, and Rav Soloveitchik himself didn't visit graveyards. He said that was the custom of his family. That was the custom of Chaim of Brisk and his father. They didn't go to visit the cemetery very often because they felt that that's the absence of Kiddusha, of holiness, and of creativity and productivity. And there, in Halachic Man, Rav Soloveitchik waxes poetic on the fact that a graveyard represents a lack of vitality and life, and life is all about creating and being mechadesh and chidushei Torah and partnering with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and in a certain sense, that creativity isn't found in the graveyard. So he admits that it wasn't his custom to visit graves, and his students also describe that he didn't even know, for instance, where. Wasn't sure exactly where his father was buried. He admitted to a Talmud. They were driving somewhere and they were passing the cemetery, and he says, "Well, I think my father was buried there." And the Talmud asks, "You think? What do you think?" Because he admitted he had only been there once. So a graveyard, again, while we believe that the neshama lives forever, but the picture, the imagery of a graveyard, it's these these matzevot, these monuments, literally. What is a matzeva? Matzeva is a marker. It's a monument. It's a monument to something that once was, but there's no life there. There's no vitality. So I think what the Gemara is saying is that if you don't convey both of these elements, right, both the intimacy and the love and the joy, but also the sense of commitment and responsibility, sham tehei kavratchem, it's just going to be a graveyard. It's not going to be any life. You're not going to see Jewish continuity, because a living, breathing, healthy Judaism requires an understanding of this nuanced, complex relationship, of this duality, of these two elements to the relationship. And I think if we appreciate this, it helps to make our relationship with Hashem and His holy Torah. And here we're standing for Chag HaShavuot, when each and every one of us will receive the Torah anew. I think if we can appreciate this and internalize this message, it helps to make our relationship with Hashem and His holy Torah one that is real, one that is honest and sincere, one that has depth to it, and one that is imbued with meaning, purpose, richness, and fullness. I'll unmute the microphones and take any questions now.
It's almost a quarter.
So it's 15 minutes.
Yeah, well, he's taking questions.
Any questions? Questions? No questions. Okay. So I will wish you all a Chag Sameach and as we say, a good Kabbalas Torah. Kabbalat Torah, a good receiving the Torah. You should receive the Torah. Ratzon, will, simcha.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chag Sameach. Chag Sameach.